So today we'll be talking about the decision unit framework and bureaucratic politics in the framework of analyzing foreign policy, decision making. So right now we are transitioning from the individual level of analysis and entering the state level of analysis. And this will be the discussion of what are the different decision units and what do we mean by bureaucratic politics. In the decision unit framework, we are interested in determining who is responsible for deciding and implementing foreign policy decisions. Okay, we say that all the regional and international factors affecting foreign policy making are channeled through some kind of a political structure of the government. This political structure identify the problem, decide on the foreign policy needed, and implement this foreign policy decision. In the foreign policy framework, we are interested in knowing who are those authorities making up the decision unit. So we are interested in the configuration and the dynamics of this decision unit. Okay, the configuration and the dynamics will help us understand, okay, how the foreign policy is being made, okay, why this particular foreign policy decision was chosen by analyzing, as I said, the configuration, who is in it, what does it consist of, one entity or separate bodies, and also the dynamics of making the decision, of reaching the decision, how they consult with each other. Okay, we will talk about this later in more details. So at this point, we are interested in the structure of the authority, okay, and its ability to commit resources for implementing foreign policy decision. Okay, so this framework is different from the realist framework, that the state is a unitary actor and speaks for one voice. And as you see in the readings in the book, the example of Iran. Iran doesn't speak with one voice, okay? We have different agencies speaking and deciding on Iran foreign policy. So we have the Grand Ayatollah, the Grand Leader, we have the President, we have the Revolutionary Guard, we have the Guardian Council. All those entities speak in the name of the Iran or claim to speak in the name of Iran and the foreign policy of Iran and the national interest of Iran. We are interested in the configuration of each entity. Who is the entity that decide really in reality on foreign policy? Who is the entity with the more resources and capacity to shape Iranian foreign policy? Basically, who is the louder voice? Who will prevail at the end? Or they reach decision in a consultative way. Okay, we will find that out, that we have different ways of reaching decisions within the decision making unit of foreign policy. So in analyzing foreign policy decision using the decision unit framework, we do the following. We take any foreign policy decision and we look at who decided this foreign policy. This is the decision unit responsible for this decision or foreign policy decision. So we look into the configuration of this unit. What does it consist of? We look into the dynamics and the processes of making the decisions. Okay. We look into how conflict is being solved within this decision-making unit. So the decision-making rules governing conflict within that unit. And sometimes, or actually most of the times, we can have different entities for different foreign policy decisions. Okay, so there is a migration problem, there is a decision unit for that. Okay, there is a terrorism problem, there is a decision unit for that. Okay, some dynamics within the decision unit are related to the cognitive approach and the personality approaches that we studied in week 2. So we can look at the leader, we can look at how he is accepting new incoming information or not. We will talk about this in the coming slides. So we have 3 different types of decision units. We have the predominant leader, we have the single unit, and we have the multiple autonomous unit. And this last one is the bureaucratic politics framework. This is another name for the bureaucratic politics framework. We will discuss the 3 types one by one. Okay, in the predominant leader decision unit, we are interested in the unit that has a single leader, very powerful leader who can make decision and stifle opposition or stop opposition or ignore opposition completely, or he knows how to silence the opposition. Okay, so in this unit, because it's a one-man show, it's a one leader, so we study the decision unit using the cognitive approaches that we studied before. We study the leader orientation, the leader background, the leader perception or misperception. Does he have cognitive simplicity or cognitive complexity? Is he sensitive or insensitive to the incoming information from the political environment? Okay, so if he's sensitive leader, he would allow new discrepant information, okay, before he make the decision. And usually the sensitive leader is more cooperative and more diplomatic in his foreign policy approach. Insensitive leader, okay, he is a leader with the cognitive dissonance. He's not open for external influence, okay. Personality and operational code is very important. He does not allow discrepant advice. He rely on the cognitive beliefs and the cognitive map in processing the incoming information. So in the single unit, we have a set of individuals, not just one person, okay? All those individuals are members of a single body, and they collectively decide a course of action in face-to-face interaction. So foreign policy decision is made within that unit, which consists of a number of individuals. Those individuals, they come from the same background, okay? So it could be a council of ministers, it could be a member of parliament, it could be an advisory committee, it could be the military. So they share the same background and they make decisions in face-to-face interactive, and their decision is collective and interactive. Okay, but most of the time they make decisions without outside consultation because they care more about group dynamics more than the accuracy of the foreign policy decisions. Important for this group is the group loyalty, the group cohesion. So here, when we study this single unit, okay, as a technique for foreign policy decision making, we are interested in the dynamics within the unit, how they accept or not accept outside information. Do they consult with outside group or not? How they manage the conflicts within the group. We discuss things like groupthink, group loyalty, and suppression of dissent. So one problem facing the single unit is groupthink, the groupthink syndrome, okay? Because the loyalty of the member of the group is more important. It is at the center. Most member of the group practice self-censorship. They cannot argue against the most important persons in this group. So they suppress their personal views, the different personal views. Also inside the group, there is suppression of non-conforming views, either from within or from the outside. Any information, different information coming from the outside is discounted, is rejected, okay, because it might challenge group judgment. The most important thing within the group is the group cohesion, the group loyalty, and this can lead to policy failure. And this is very disastrous for foreign policy. Okay, groupthink is defined as a premature closure around an initially advocated course of action, which means that the group tries to avoid conflict and reach quick consensus. And this is important for group cohesion and group loyalty. So within the unit, we have different dynamics taking place. Either you can have groupthink, okay, suppression of incoming information, and accepting only information that is dominant within the group, self-censorship. Also, you can reach decision based on unanimity, which is resolution of conflict. We reach consensus, or within the group we can reach plurality, acceptance of conflict, and allowing the majority of the decisions, majority of the opinion to rule. And here the role of the leader is very important, okay, and how he manage group dynamics. In the book, you have a very nice example about the role of Nixon versus Kennedy. Nixon has a decision unit and Kennedy has a decision unit. In the Nixon example, it shows how he suppresses discrepant information. If you dare to say something different from Nixon, you're not allowed to the meeting next Tuesday. But Kennedy was a leader that would allow discrepant information, new information, different information. So he's a leader with cognitive complexity. For any foreign policy decision, especially within the unit, we have different possible decision outcomes. So we either have the leader that suppresses dissent and adopting the dominant solution, which is the leader's solution. Okay, that's one option. The other option that we reach a deadlock, we cannot arrive at a decision because we cannot agree on anything. That's a deadlock solution. And there is the other alternative, which is the integrative solution, which is reaching a compromise. We discuss, we argue, and then we vote, and we reach a compromise. And then the last option will be the subset solution. So we also have the different opinions. Every member will discuss his point of view, and we adopt part of the solutions suggested, meaning subset solution, subset of the group member preferences. So we agree with some members and disagree with other members. So dominant solution, deadlock solution, compromise, or subset solution. So now we come to the multiple autonomous units. It is similar to the game that we played in the classroom. So this is the bureaucratic politics model. We have in the decision unit, members come from different entities, different departments, different ministries, okay? And they come as representative of those entities. They come as autonomous actors. They come as agents of their departments or their ministries or their entities. And they are motivated to protect the interest they present. They are motivated to protect their perception, their definition of their national interest, the national interest from the perception of their entity. Okay? They cannot force compliance on anybody. That's why it's called multiple autonomous unit. Those actors are autonomous actors. No one can force a decision on the other units. Very important to understand what are the rule of interaction within this kind of decision unit. So bureaucratic politics is making a very important claim. Foreign policy bureaucracy is no longer confined to ministries of foreign affairs, meaning that other ministries are involved too. So the intelligence, the economic ministries, the military. So other units or other entities are involved in making foreign policy decisions, and not only the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This will bring us to a very important problem. How do we coordinate between those ministries? So we have the problem of coordination. We have a problem of policy control. We have the problem of responsibility. If something went wrong, who will be held responsible? There is also a very important problem. If there is a division within the unit, outsiders, so outside nations, can play on the internal divisions. Going back to the Iran example, so when you have the split inside Iran between the hardliners and the softliners or the moderates, outsiders are playing on that division in order to promote the foreign policy decision that is in the interest of the outsiders, not in the interest of the nation. So bottom line is we have other agencies involved in the making of foreign policy, not just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but we have the military, the economic ministries, the intelligence, the presidential and ministerial offices. All those are involved in foreign policy decision making. So as I said before, in that unit, each agency, each actor is interested in pursuing their own version of national interest or their own concerns. So each agency has an interpretation of the problem and their interpretation of the national interest. There is the perception of the military, there is a perception of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, exactly what we did in the class when we talked about the problem of immigration. There is the perception of the Homeland Security. There is the perception of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is the perception of the president. There is a perception of the military. There is a perception of the Department of Labor. And they try to defend those concerns. Here we have the problem of coordination, and the coordination, intelligent coordination need intelligent leadership, or there will be constitutional provision that will explain to us how we arrive at a decision in the case of conflict. So either we have the constitution that tell us what to do in a situation of disagreement, or we have an intelligent leader who can maneuver and coordinate between the members of the group. As I told you, there is a problem of agency. Who is responsible for the decision? Now we have different entities making this decision. Who is responsible for the decision? Because this responsibility is related to accountability. If something went wrong, who will be held accountable? Here we have also the role of culture. Does the culture of the country allow for disagreement and coordination? We also discuss within the analysis the institutional structure. For example, if we talk about the role of the Congress and the role of the executives in United States when it comes to Iran nuclear deal, okay, we need to look at the configuration of Congress. Okay, who is the majority, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, in order to understand the position of Congress. So this model is different from realism, as I mentioned before. Realism discuss the state or address the state as a unitary actor. It's a black box. We're not interested in the disagreement that happens inside the state. The state is a unitary actor, speaks with one voice in the outside world. Okay. Also for realism, the notion of rationality. The state is rational, pursuing national interest. But in the bureaucratic politics, as I told you, we have multiple autonomous units or actors, okay, and each unit has their own version or interpretation of national interest, and decision is the result of bargaining and compromise, not rationality. Okay, so here the question of interaction between separate agency or agencies responsible for external relations and their competition that might undermine the effectiveness of foreign policy decision. Finally, we make some remarks about the bureaucratic politics model. So here, the foreign policy decision is a result of a political process. Different actors discussing, bargaining, agreeing, disagreeing, constitutional provision, leadership style. So decision is the result of a political process. Okay? Sometimes we have conflicting recommendation. Okay, because actors, they have their own perception and representation of the problem and the ramification for their interest and for their domain. Okay, so as I told you in the example, Homeland Security is discussing the ramification of a migration decision from their own perspective and the ramification on the labor or the workers inside the United States. For the foreign ministry or the Department of State, they have their own understanding, representation of the problem, their understanding of the consequences and the ramification, exactly like we discussed in class. Also, the Department of Homeland Security, they have their own interpretation and representation of the problem and understanding of the ramification. They think only about protection or protecting the territorial integrity of the homeland, the United States. Also, as we saw in the example, those entities can compete for the resources. So if their decision or their interpretation was chosen, this means that they will get more resources from the state in order to implement this version of national interest. So sometimes they are competing for the interest of their institution in order to get more resources. More resources means more power. So here, which actor dominate discussion of the foreign policy choice? Okay, the domestic objective of the actor may be significant than the international objective of the government. Um, the bureaucratic politics is a bargaining process and it's inward looking. Inward looking game is like, who would win? Is it the Department of Labor? Is it the Department of Homeland Security? Is it Congress? Who would win? We are looking inside for the competition between institutions more than we looking at the outside national interest of the state.